Hello, welcome to the show. Well, normally it's a bit of a football bias show. I don't mean bias towards either of the Sheffield clubs. I mean, it does have a football bent, but really and rightly, the sporting focus is all on cricket this week. It's been wonderful not only to see England win, but to see Test cricket back on our terrestrial TVs. And it's a time to celebrate not only individuals, but an organisation. An organisation that's quite close to my heart, actually, just down the road from where I'm speaking to you now, where I spend many a happy Saturday afternoon in summer. Aberdale Park, home of Sheffield Collegiate Cricket Club, also the home over the years of Joe Root, the England captain, and Michael Vaughan, the former England captain, who is our special guest today. Michael, greetings to you.
Enjoying greetings. Oh, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm very, very well. I know you are too, despite being equalised by a certain Joe Root at the moment. 26 Test victories apiece now.
Yeah, I mean, he's had an incredible start to 2021. The win in India it's a special victory. I know they're only 1-0 up, 3 to play, and India will come back. We know that, and they'll be stronger and harder to beat going forward. But that performance, you don't often say that there's a 10 out of 10 performance, but I know there was a drop catch from Jofra Archer. You could argue about the declaration being slightly cautious, but that's just nitpicking an incredible performance by an England team. The one thing that I always look for in teams is, do they look like they play as a team? Do they look like they're all working their roles for, obviously, to work out their individual skill sets, but it's all about the team. And Joe, in the last year and a half with Chris Silver, I do think Chris Silver deserves a special mention, because since Chris Silver has been the England coach, the Test match team has become a proper Test match team by playing Test match cricket the right way. Before that, I think Joe will be the first to admit that the Test match team played like the one-day team. It was very, very risky. The players that they were picking were very much based towards the white ball game. You play that style of cricket in Test match cricket, you might have the odd week or two where it's flamboyant and you win, but consistently over a long period of time, it's very, very difficult to continue to win. Since Chris has been in charge with Joe, they've just played Test match cricket the right way. You get a top 6 batting unit that looks to bat a long period of time. You get different angle changes with your bowling attack to try and get 20 wickets. And it's about wearing the opposing team down. And that's what the Test team now has done for a year and a half. And it doesn't surprise me that you're seeing performances like you saw in Chennai. The pressure in a way is now on, because we're all getting very excited. As much as winning in India would be incredible, those Ashes are only 10 months away from starting. England need those Ashes back. And this last week or two wins in Sri Lanka, I'll be honest, it's the first time I've really watched the Test match team and started to get very excited that they're onto something that could be very special later on in the year when they get down to Australia to take on the Ashes. So Joe, he's doing a remarkable job. He's on 26. He'll be soon 27. He'll get more Test wins than anybody. Good luck to whoever takes it next to try and surpass whatever he ends up with. And it could be 40, 45 wins. He's doing a great job. But I think we're all very proud of him in Sheffield, and obviously from Sheffield Collegiate. 52 Test wins for Sheffield Collegiate. And it's growing. It's still going, Alan. So it's great for the city.
It is fantastic. And throw in the world's #1 umpire, Richard Kettleborough, and his links with Sheffield Collegiate. And that club rules the cricketing world. Incredible.
Oh, it's a different club now. I mean, when I was there in the 80s, early 90s, it was a great club for a young player, because they gave you opportunities. And I think that's the most important aspect of a cricket club is you've got to have this pathway where players can come through, and it's not just giving them a chance to play in the men's teams, but it's giving them a chance to play in the right position in the men's team. And I remember Joe coming through as a young whippersnapper, quite tall, very thin, and he used to open the batting in the second 11. My brother was the captain. There was many times where he'd get 35 not out in 50 overs because he didn't have the power and he couldn't pierce the field. But you look back to those kind of years in his career, and it's probably made him the player that he is now, because he's so skillful. He can maneuver the ball behind square, in front of the square. Against spin, he's always had to be proactive. the best player that I've seen in an England jersey playing spin. And the club deserve a lot of credit because, when did I leave there? Probably early 2000s in terms of not playing any cricket at the club. The academy that's been set up, the development programme. I do think Sheffield Collegiate are a market leader across the whole of the country of how to develop young talent to come through the system. And there's always that golden light at the end of a tunnel that you might end up having a career at the end of it. And Joe Root, myself, Richie Kettleby, you mentioned, and I'm sure, I know Josh Varley's going to come on the show and discuss. I'm sure there's a next conveyor belt of young Joe Roots that are coming through the system, which is what it's all about.
Yeah, indeed. Josh, no pressure. When are you going to take up the mantle then and become England captain? Josh, by the way, is the current Sheffield Collegiate skipper. Welcome, Josh.
Hi, Alan. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm great. Absolutely great. And I know we see each other quite a lot during the summer. And you're a big pal of Joe Root, and you help him out with coaching tips. Tongue in cheek there about you following in the footsteps. But how close a contact have you had with Joe, particularly during this period when, by his own admission, and certainly people around it like Michael have been referring to this need to convert 50s into 100s, and he's focused on that. Have you been involved in that conversation?
I think in terms of the conversion, I'll speak on that first. I think that's been a really a big mindset of Joe's, of how he's changed. I remember it was this time last year that I was starting to do quite a bit of work with Joe. I mean, we've always done it, but it was a bit of a regular. It was just before the New Zealand tour. And I remember being in the car on the way to Denstone College and him turning around to me and just sort of saying, it's not a bad problem to have, not being able to convert your 50s to 100s. And it's not. But in terms of someone of Joe's quality, I think he wanted more from himself. I think this last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and certainly running up to it, his preparation, what other coaches will be able to say is that he's worked very, very hard and found a way to really go big. And I think he really deserves that. Knowing Joe as I know him, he will have pierced every innings. He'll have looked at every detail, how he's got out, how he hasn't got out, and all these different ways of how he's done stuff. And I think for him, it's massive. How far he's come in the last few weeks, but it will have been a long period of time. Both confidence will have grown, and mentally as well. I think he's adapted really well. I said previously to someone that if I could have picked somewhere for Joe to go and play, it would have certainly been India and Sri Lanka. He's very, very. I know Vaughan's picked up on it. There isn't many players who play spin like Joe do at the moment. You looked at how comfortable he was. His different shot selection, front foot, back foot. You look at guys who had strengths against spin, who stuck to one shot, and when it was in their area, they hit their sweep shot or they cut the ball. And I think Joe has shown that he can do all these sorts of things. The way they're playing the spin nowadays, and Joe's shown it really, that he's got an abundance of shot selections and strengths.
Right. Well, 20 centuries is the tally now. 5 double hundreds, 49 50s rather. Michael, as Josh was saying, converting 50s to 100s not a bad problem to have. But what's your theory about the way that he's gone about it and why he succeeded in that mission?
Two things. I think the conditions really suit his game. I think he's alluded to that after the win in Chennai. I think obviously the element of the way that he plays spin makes him very comfortable. He's got such great options against all the different spinners, a real clear and clarity about where he's looking to score. I think tempo, I just think he's stayed on an even keeled tempo. I don't think, if you go back to, a couple of years by where he'd almost go up in the gears in a test match innings, he'd get to 40 and you could see that he'd go up to third gear and then go into fourth gear. And he was taking too many undue risks. A lot of the times that he got out between 50 and 100, it was by taking an undue risk, playing a big drive, just taking something on in Test match cricket that you don't really need to take on. And sometimes, as a great player, and he is, it's just about sitting down and just being realistic in your own mind and your own thought process and going, why am I taking those undue risks? I don't need to. And I think one of the key strengths and findings that he would have looked at is every time he scores 100 for England in Test match cricket, they haven't lost. So his goal now for this next 12 months is if he can continue in the form, he just knows by him getting runs, it's going to get his team, particularly in that first innings, to a big number. And then it makes his team that much more difficult to beat. And I think sometimes when you get the captaincy, you get so engrossed with the management side of players, picking teams, talking to the selectors, talking to the coaches and all the different managements around the team, that you actually forget that you have to go out and play. And that's experience, and that takes a little bit of time. It took me 12 months in captaincy to understand that, wait a minute, I have to go out and play. I've got to be the player as well as the captain. And I think over the last few months, I think I'll keep saying Chris Silverwood has helped Joe massively, because Chris has taken a lot of the work away from him that possibly he was doing under Trevor Bayliss, that necessarily he didn't need to be doing. And by doing that, Chris has said, look, Joe, you just concentrate on getting those runs. Of course, tactically, I've never had any question about Joe's tactics. I think he sees the game fine. Tactics are just an opinion. He may have 3 slips one day. I may have had 4. It's just an opinion. That doesn't worry me at all in captaincy, the tactical side. But the leadership side, and you can see, and understandably with the way that he's played and the way that the team have been winning, you can see in his interviews that he's now speaking with very calm authority. Everyone listens to everything he says. Whereas, again, like me at the start of my captaincy reign, I've actually Googled some of my interviews and they're pathetic, because you're young, you're not too sure what you're doing, you're not too sure what your message is. And then all of a sudden, you're having to lead this group of players, of which many are senior pros to you. You look at Joe going into the captaincy, he's got Stuart Broad, Alistair Cook, Jimmy Anderson, he's now captain them. I had Goffey, I had the likes of Andy Caddick, Nasser Hussain, Alex Stewart, and I'm going, wait, I'm a junior pro compared to these guys, yet I'm leading them. So leadership develops over time, and I think he's found his kind of niche in the way that he's leading the team. I also think, it was a few weeks ago, I said, I hope he's in the T20 World Cup because of the way that he plays spin. Having seen the way that he's playing in Test cricket now, I hope he's not in the T20 World Cup. And he'll probably hate me for saying that. And the reason I say that is I think he's got this Test team playing so well, and he's playing so well in his game, that by missing the T20 World Cup later on in the year, he will be able to get to Australia on November the 1st. And that'll give Joe, he'll maybe have to quarantine for a while, but it's going to give him 3.5 weeks with the Test players playing 3 or 4 4-day games in Aussie conditions to get really ready for that Ashes that look like they're going to start on around December the 8th. If he plays the T20 World Cup, he is the Test match captain, might not arrive in Australia till about mid-November. Then you quarantine, then you've got about 8 days with those T20 players to get ready for Test match cricket. I just think for him as the captain, it's such a big Ashes series for him as the captain, a 3rd time that he'd have captained against Australia. I think by missing that T20 World Cup, as much as I think he's good enough to get in the T20 team, for him to be that captain to win those Ashes back, I think that'll give him the best chance of doing so.
Well, that is a really, really interesting point, Michael. You're never afraid to have an opinion, court controversy. It's often quite an argument around you. The stats are 26 Test victories in 47 tests. You achieved 26 in 51, but let's not split hairs. The opinions that you hold, for instance, on the timing of the declaration in Chennai, and you weren't the only one feeling that it had been delayed too long. Is that simply you doing the job that you're paid for, isn't it? You're paid
Absolutely.
to have.
Well, there was others that were a bit more irate. It wasn't the declaring is a great feeling to have as a team, because you're so on top that you're basically pulling out. It's great. It wasn't the actual time. It was more the last few overs of the day on day 4 that they didn't surround the bat. When you've got all those runs on the board, the reason why you bat on in Test match cricket is to allow yourself to have more fielders around the bat. And it was just Dominic Bess. He had a cover point on the boundary for the last over of the day. The off spinner spinning into a right-hander. Josh is a Sheffield Collegiate captain. He wouldn't be allowing his off spinner to have a cover point on the boundary. We had 400 on the deck. So I think the problem now is social media. it just kind of blows up into a cesspit of opinion and conversation. People kind of sway the way that you say things. Declaring, I always think, is a wonderful thing. The team that declares generally always wins, whether they do it too late. There's not many teams bat out the last day. I never ever thought that England were going to lose the game. I never thought that they wouldn't win the game, having seen the pitch play the way that it did on day 4. But I will certainly say that if an off spinner's bowling on the 4th evening with 400 on the deck, and you've only got 2 fielders around the bat and cover point on the boundary to a right-hander, I'd suggest that's not the right field.
Yeah, Josh, you're feeling on that. You're captain now. What are you doing? All right, obviously you're going to win the Test match. You can't criticise Joe Root at all for that.
I mean, some of the spinners. I mean, one of the off spinners I've played with was Billy Root. He wouldn't have had that. I think he would have had a slight different field. In terms of spinners in sort of our cricket as such, I think it's allowing and I think what probably Joe has done as well, because I can't imagine that was Joe's choice of field, is allowing the bowler the freedom of the field. I think the talk replies on social media to various people were talking about what makes Dom Bess feel comfortable. And I think sometimes as a captain, certainly an attribute would be is taking the bowler out of the comfort zone. Know when to tell him, okay, right, you're settled now. You've not been hit there for a few overs. We could use that space, or we could use that fielder in a different area where we might create something else from it. And I think that's probably what the crossover of where Dom Bess has been allowed what he wanted, and maybe Joe deciding what is best for him in that situation. And I think that's in club cricket, sometimes you get people who don't know much about the away from just the batting and the bowling side, and you have to support them a bit more in that decision, especially the young guys coming through, and of where to put the fielders, because sometimes nowadays you don't just have a bog standard field with the way how guys play spin. And I think it's important that sometimes your senior players, not just spin bowlers, people like Jimmy and even the batters as well, like Joe and Stokesy, where they would support someone like Dom in maybe having a different field and explain why he would have that field, while still making him feel comfortable. Yeah,
I mean, I must say, Alan, we're nitpicking, really. We really are nitpicking. It was just those last 3 overs. I look at someone like Dominic Bess. He's had 3 good Test matches. He got 4 for in the first innings. He got out the great Virat Kohli with one that just bounced a little bit, caught short leg. And our jobs are, of course, to look at the game as an impartial. And I think people forget that once you go into the media, I believe the worst pundits are pundits that you listen to that are cheerleaders, that are clearly supporting one team. You're not a pundit if you're being a cheerleader. You've got to be impartial. You've got to look at the game purely as a layman. You're just looking at the game of cricket. You can't, in our jobs, look at the game, I'm an ex-England player. Of course I want England to win. I'm desperate for England to win. But when I'm in my workplace, I've got to look at the game as my job allows me to, which is to be fair, is to assess the conditions, to assess what's going on. And on the back of a 4 for in the first innings with 2 overs to go on day 4 with 400 on the deck with 2 right-handers in, if you're having to have a cover point on that, I described it on a digital station that I go on in India. It was very similar, that cover point fielder, to a lot of politicians around the world. Null and void.
Yeah, okay. And we could talk about lockdown and when we're going to get out of it. And maybe we should talk about lockdown and when we're going to get out of it and get spectators back. Because I think, going back to March last year, if we'd have had this virus problem and magically we'd have had a vaccine to protect the vulnerable there and then, there never would have been a lockdown in the first place. But anyway, I'm joining you in becoming controversial now, and I mustn't do it. Before long, Michael, you can apply for a membership of a parish council near you.
Oh, I'll let you on to something there, Alan. I actually live in that not in the parish of Hamforth, no. But my next door neighbour knows Jackie Weaver. Now there is a claim to fame. Forget knowing the likes of Tiger Woods, but if you know Jackie Weaver, you are up there.
I am so impressed, and if I'd have known this beforehand, my tweets promoting this show would have included that fact. Never mind the fact that you're on. And also, by the way, Michael, if you clock up 3 appearances on this show, we'll give you a signed shirt.
Is that right?
Which Joe Root didn't get in India.
Well, that's you give one out to Nathan Lyon, having won it in that last test at the Gabba, and then you don't give Joe one in Chennai. I found that a bit odd, but it is what it is. England are 1-0 up. I guess from an Indian perspective, just briefly on them, I don't know what Josh feels, but they didn't seem the same team for the first 3 days. Virat was a little bit, I don't know, it looked like Virat was trying to be nice. It looked like Virat was almost trying to captain like a Jinka Rihani and be this calm individual out in the field. He was very placid. He even gave Joe a nice stretch when he got a bit of cramp. That's not the Virat Kohli that I know from captain. And he's very aggressive. He's very in the opposing players' faces. He does like to put pressure on the umpires. We didn't see that until day 4. We saw a glimpse of his brilliance with the bat on day 5. We'll see a different Virat Kohli in that second test. I can pretty much guarantee that. All
right. Well, just before we go into the break, and I haven't mentioned Sheffield Wednesday yet. I always do when you're on, and it's a bit brighter for them at the moment. I've got something to throw at you via Darren Goff and Goffey, and Adrian Durham contacted me after you were on here before. Of course, Adrian and Goffey host a show, Drive Time, on TalkSport, he said, did you ask Vaughan about the Yorkshire dressing room prankster who would randomly cut socks and pants? He says, we never found out who it was. Goffey says it wasn't him. Was it you?
Well, I know there was a near-on police investigation to try and find out who the snipper of the socks was. It wasn't me. I would suggest that it may be a player that played for a while and now coaches in and around the southern area. That's all I can say. And I'm only saying that because he's actually admitted it on another podcast somewhere else. So I do remember David Byers getting him and Michael Bevan got their socks snipped at Sussex. It was Eastbourne. And the snipper decided to strike at lunch on day 4, as Sussex still required 200 to win the game with 3 wickets left. So I think the snipper thought that the victory was done and dusted. So decided to strike, and Sussex managed to win the game. They imagine Bingo and Bevan kicking the dressing room, throwing everywhere, anything that he could find. Then went into the showers first, both of them, and all of us are sat in the dressing room gutted. There'd been drop catches, terrible bowling. We'd put in a terrible performance. And then all of a sudden, Bingo Byers puts his socks on, and they went through. He went nuts, and then Michael Bevan the same. They stormed out, and then the next day it was a 40-over game at the same venue. And I remember it was a 1 o'clock start. We were team time at 11, and we all sat in a little circle on the ground. And Bingo just went, right, we ain't leaving here to warm up until someone admits to snipping the socks yesterday. We didn't warm up for the game.
Really?
We sat in a circle for an hour and a half, and everyone thought we were having a debrief from yesterday's game. And it was because no one would own up to snipping the socks.
Blimey.
True story.
It's a great story. That heavy, that serious. I introduced it as a joke, I wasn't realising I was really treading on very sore feelings there. Okay, more on Joe Root, England's success, Sheffield Collegiate with Josh Varley and Michael Vaughan, and on Sheffield Wednesday and Sheffield United, dare I say, in a couple of minutes. Hope you can join us there.